Ranjana Jashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Ashtottara Shata Shishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Ashtottara Shata Shishimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantarashimam Bhagavatam Ki Dai Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to Shishiguru and Shigauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, The Signs of God, Chapter 15, Instructions for Civilized Human Beings, text number 30. Jaschita bijaje jatha Syanniha Shangoparigraha Shannishango Parigraha Eko Vipikta Sarano Bhikshur Vaishya Mitashana Jaschitta Vijaye Jata Shannishango Parigraha Eko Vibhikta Sharano Bhikshur Vaikshya Mitashana Jaschitta Vijaye Jata Shannishango Parigraha Eko Vibhikta Sharano Bhikshur Vaishya Mitashana. Please, Chan. Jaschita Vijaye Jata Shyam Nishango Parigraha Eko Bibikta Sharano Bhikshur Vaishya Mitashana Jaschita Vijaye Jata Shyam Nishango Parigraha Eko Bibikta Sharano Bhikshur Vaiksha Mitashana Yaha, one who Chitta Vijaye, conquering the mind. Jataha is engaged. Syat must be. Nishangaha, without contaminated association. Aparigraha, without being dependent on the family. Ekaha, alone. Vivikta Sharanaha, taking shelter of a solitary place. Vikshuhu, a renounced person. Vaishya, by begging alms just to maintain the body. Mita ashana, frugal eating. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who desires to conquer the mind must leave the company of his family and live in a solitary place, free from contaminated association. To maintain the body and soul together, he should beg as much as he needs for the bare necessities of life. Purport. This is the process for conquering the agitation of the mind. One is recommended to take leave of his family and live alone, maintaining body and soul together by begging alms and eating only as much as needed to keep himself alive. Without such process, one cannot conquer lusty desires. Sannyas means accepting a life of begging, which makes one automatically very humble and meek and free from lusty desires. In this regard, the following verse appears in the Smriti literature. Dvandahatasya grihasthyam dhyana bhangadikaranam lakshajitva grihispatam sanyaset abhicharayam. In this world of duality, family life is the cause that spoils one's spiritual life or meditation. Specifically understanding this fact, one should accept the order of sannyas without hesitation. Jaschita vigyate jata syan nishango parigraha eko bibikta sharano bhikshur vaiksha mitashana. One who desires to conquer the mind must leave the company of his family and live in a solitary place, free from contaminated association. To maintain the body and soul together, he should beg as much as he needs for the bare necessities of life. Om Agyana Timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurube Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pestaya Bhutale Shimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashutyade Shatarine. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu vyaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. The instruction here is focusing on the means to control the mind, and is giving the recommendation or basically the means by which this is achieved, the process by which this is achieved. And Prabhupada says, without such process, one cannot conquer lofty desires. So you remember, if we backtrack in Srila Narada Muni, giving instruction for civilized human beings, how it is very important to deal with the materially conditioned way of life, and in terms of conquering all these enemies, lust, greed, anger, etc., and how all these activities that regulate civilized man are meant to reawaken one's connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A few verses ago, we heard that all these different regulations, rules and regulations, sacrifices, etc., that are meant to elevate ones to the mode of goodness, if they are not connected, if they don't make a connection with the absolute truth, with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they're just a waste of time. So now, the purpose of all this is to bring one to self-realization, to understand, one's constitutional position. That's the ultimate goal. Now, a very pivotal element that needs to be achieved in order to be able to, have a clear path for self-realization is the controlling of the mind. And that to the point that the basis or it is explained that the goal of the processes of yoga, Prabhupada explains, is to conquer the mind, is to control the mind. So it's a very pivotal need or goal that is there in the path of self-realization. Basically, what we hear in this verse is like a nutshell version of the chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, Dhyana Yoga. And chapter 6, well, the whole Bhagavad Gita is whatever you open, what all the chapters have, is just full of wonderful instructions. But the 6th chapter is very interesting because Krishna exactly is almost expands on this verse that is right here. First of all, Krishna explains to Arjuna that what is the qualification to take up this renunciation, this sannyas? So he's playing. Let me look for the chapter 6 here. It's just very beautiful. And also, it makes it very clear too. It makes it very clear what is the process that one is qualified according to one's condition or condition in consciousness. Then what process of self-realization one is able to perform. So he explained to Arjuna that that for one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. And then he says, a person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruited activities. And then he says, let me see, where is this? So basic, here. What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, also of Pandu, for one can never become a yogi unless he renounces desires for sense gratification. So, what this means is that as long as we have some desires, as long as we're still conditioned by material desires, then we're not qualified for the life of renunciation of the sannyasi, to give up work. A sannyasi completely abandons, the material duties. He have no work to do. He can renounce work, and so he ceases all material activities. That's the sannyas. But for be qualified for that, you have to be completely renounced of material desires. So they're not there. You're able to easily abandon that. Now you don't have those material desires. You qualify for the life of renunciation. If we're not there, if we still have material desires, then Krishna say works is said to be the means. So what is this work that he refers to is what he's been teaching Arjuna in the previous verses, which is Niskam Karma Yoga, which is work in devotional service. And so that is the means. That's what he recommends to Arjuna, because Arjuna is still, we understand that, Arjuna is taking that position, which is basically us, the conditioned souls in this material world, that were affected by this bodily conception of life. So the instruction is, works is to be the means, this Nishkam Karma Yoga. And so, nevertheless, in everything in the process of yoga, either Niskam Karma Yoga or Dhyana Yoga or Sannyas, Dhyana Yoga is called Sannyas Yoga. A target, an immediate target, is to control the mind. And Krishna says that, he says this, one must deliver himself with the help of the mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind remains the greatest enemy. So the mind is this pivotal, how would you say this pivotal element that is important to control, to conquer. And if we think about the mind, what is the mind? So the mind sometimes is explained that is the sixth sense, right? There's five senses, the mind is a sixth. Now, Krishna explains in chapter 7 that the mind is superior to the five senses. So it is explained that the mind is the king of all the senses. So with the mind, what do we do with the mind? What is the function of the mind? With the mind, basically we process. We process all the sensations, all the things that the senses are in immediate contact with the objects of the senses, with the material world. Through the senses, we experience the material world. But the mind is the one that processes everything. So, in reality, with the mind is that we experience the material world. The senses just contact them. But the experience that the living entity has is through the mind. So, the mind is the one, it is explained that the mind has these three functions: feeling, thinking, and willing. Feeling, if we understand this feeling, is when you're able to experience. If there is no connection with the mind and the senses, if that connection is broken, then that's a disease that sometimes people suffer with. There's a disconnect between the mind and the senses. It's a disease, neurological disease, right? Neurological disease. There is one disease that is called the Lou Gehrig disease, right? ALS. I can't remember the term that they use. I know they call ALS, which is the initials. But I know my mother died from that disease. And so I have the chance to see the effects of that disease, by sometimes of being with my mother. And what happened is that the connection of the senses, all the senses, with the mind, it didn't have that connection, so she couldn't experience the world. So she couldn't taste properly, she couldn't use the senses properly, the senses didn't obey the dictations of the mind. So it was a very frustrated condition. The intellect, the mind was perfect. The mind was functioning quite perfectly in terms of, understanding. The intellect was there, but there was no connection with the senses, so she couldn't execute the dictates of the mind, nor she could experience the objects with the senses. So that is what the mind does. With the mind, we really process the material world. We experience the material world. And therefore, it's such a pivotal element for just the functioning of the living entity in the material world. So the mind then process all this information that is sort of received through the senses of the material world and creates a conception and creates an attachment. So just, reviewing, our whole process, through my senses, I smell something, and through that association, then that smell becomes an experience. And I feel something with my mind, and then through that association, I create an attachment. So, yeah, I like this. This is nice. So it creates an attachment. It becomes attached to that particular feeling, sensation. And then the thinking happen. Thinking is this meditation and this constant sort of absorption on these experiences. And the willing power is the decisions, the desires that the mind has to continue getting more and more and more of that experience. So the mind, by association with the objects of the senses, by that processing and the combinations of the modes in which the living entity is functioning, creates what is called a conception, an upadi. Upadi means a particular conception of the self. So the mind, through the mind, then the mind affects the conception of the self that the living entity has. That's how the whole thing is created. So therefore, although, what is all that noise that is there? Through, although, this misconception of the self is the immediate is functioning, which is what is called the false ego, the ahamkara, which is a much more subtle element than the mind. Is the actual of the material elements is the most subtle element, the false ego. That is affected by the mind connections and process and attachments like that. Then that creates these different misconceptions of the self. Oh, I recognize myself with these particular sets of desires, and this is who I am. So, therefore, this consciousness, the word for consciousness, the Sanskrit word is cheta or chaitanya. Chaitanya means consciousness. It comes from the word cheta. But also, the word cheta is translated as mind. So sometimes they're so interconnected that, the mind basically is the sitting place of our consciousness. And another way that the mind is described in the scripture is that the mind is like a mirror. So the mirror of the mind is a very common simile. That's what the mind, it's a mirror. It's a mirror in which the reflection of the self is able to, be achieved. So, the mind then basically being a mirror, and then all the different conceptions that are created by the mind's processing of material experiences then becomes all kinds of covering of the mirror of the mind. So these are different things. This is called upadis, conceptions. So all these conceptions becomes the covering of the mirror of the mind. So naturally, if we are the living entity, the experience of the living entity looking at themselves in a very dirty cover mirror is that the living entity cannot see properly the self, the true self. What the living entity is able to see is layers and layers of all kinds of things. And because of the the bewilderment of the living entity is that the living entity considers themselves to be all those different things that are covering the mirror. So the process of self-realization then is described by Lord Chaitanya as the cleansing of the mirror of the heart. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. So Cheta again means mind. Cheto Dharpana Marjanam. Marjanam means to cleanse. So Cheto Dharpana Marjanam, the cleansing of the mirror of the heart. So most important, pivotal goal of the process of self-realization, or someone who is has an aspiring transcendentalist. So back to the recommendation here is that the process that is given is that one has to renounce the world, especially move. So right here we're following the natural, established structure of human civilization, which is, the four varnas and the four ashrams. So from the Grihastha ashram, then one moves from the Grihastha ashram and goes into a life of renunciation. So basically, the abandonment of one's connection with Griha, with family life, is an important natural element or how you say, step in the process of self-realization. And the recommendation is when one have to abandon the family and live in a solitary place and basically focus on fully controlling the mind. And then, after fully control the mind, we hear how Narada Muni is still going to continue the instructions one would have to do in that solitary place to control the mind and absorb oneself in one's connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna says the same thing to Arjuna in the 6th chapter. Then he goes to describe that, let me see here. A transcendentalist should engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. And then he goes to explain, more about the process. Then he goes to do, the process of Astanga Yoga. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kushagrash on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on a very firmly and the yogi should then The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. So he goes to explain how he can do that to breathing and there's a whole practice. But the principle is that one is focused on focus the mind on the relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then basically the reason of living alone or being in a solitary place, in a sacred place, is that the distractions for the senses, the distractions for the mind, those things that the mind became attached to, one's, life in contact with the material senses, those things are restricted. Basically, they're eliminated. They're not there. So naturally, it becomes more easy to focus the mind in a situation in which we are with so many distractions in terms of, family distractions, society distractions, work distractions. Then it becomes more difficult to focus the mind. So in a solitary place, in a sacred place, then it becomes more easy. Then there's no all these distractions, and one can simply focus the mind without distractions. And the purpose is to purify the heart. Same thing, the Cheto Darpana Marjanam, purify the heart and the mind, controlling the mind, purifying for all these material attachments. So that's the principle. Then Arjuna, just like, Arjuna just asked the question for us, because this process is very unpractical for us. For a regular person, and especially in Kali Yuga, Arjuna was in the previous age, in Dwapara Yuga, and he tells Krishna that, what does he say here? That this is just too difficult. It's unpractical. Let's see, where is this verse? He say, "O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady." So, for Arjuna, the situation was, how are we going to do this? How I'm going to, maybe abandoning, the family and going, I can figure it out that, but then to sit down in a place and completely shut down the senses and the connection, and then focusing on controlling the mind, especially this specific point of controlling the mind, then is way too difficult. Because the mind is described, Arjuna goes and saying, the mind is restless, chanchala, is turbulent, is obstinate, and very strong. Oh Krishna, to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than than controlling the wind. So this particular task is a huge task, because the nature of the mind is that it's very flickering. So to control it is not easy. He compares to control the wind. So to control the wind is, a strong wind is very, very difficult. If you get a tornado, how are you going to control a tornado or a cyclone or something like that? They're helpless. They can't control it. So the mind have that nature. So to control the mind is a very, very difficult task. And especially for someone, just regular person. And what to speak right now. Back then, because the whole society was geared to bring people in a very organic way through all this process of, living family life and then renouncing family life and then, taking up the life of a sannyas. Everything was very organic. People did it, and there was not a big deal. It was just like, okay, so next stage, like that. Nowadays, people, they go through that, but they don't abandon, the attachments. They go, okay, they prepare for retirement, right? So they prepare for retirement, but for retirement is, now I don't have distractions for enjoying life. So I don't have, all these different distractions of work. Now I simply enjoy life. So I spend my life, just hitting a ball into a little hole or something like that, and sitting in some beach or something, like that. Enjoying life, drinking, my little whatever, and eating all these things, and I don't have any problems. I can do like that. Don't have botherations of kids. I don't have botherations of bills. Everything is, I don't have to work. My savings so retire. But that's not what we talking here. What the natural progression was to self-realization, towards self-realization. But that's not the situation now. We have a society that is not conducive for all this. So how are we gonna do that? Are we able to just, go to the Himalayas, and practice austerities and renunciation there and fully focus the mind on the absolute truth? It will become, it sounds unpractical, like Arjuna said. So Krishna gave the answer, and and then Prabhupada explains in the purport of the answer that Krishna gave. He gave us, the answer that is applicable for the present times for us, which is, extremely insightful and clarifies it completely. So when Krishna says to Arjuna, "O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment." And then, so practice and detachment, these two things, that's what makes it possible. Practice and detachment. And then Prabhupada's in the purport. I'm going to read the whole purport because it's so, it's Bhaktivedanta's, Srila Prabhupada's a genius and perfect clarification for all of us. The difficulty of controlling the obstinate mind, as expressed by Arjuna, is accepted by the personality of Godhead. But at the same time, he suggests that by practice and detachment, it is possible. What is that practice? In the present age, no one can observe the strict rules and regulations of placing oneself in a sacred place, focusing the mind on the supersoul, restraining the senses and mind, observing celibacy, remaining alone, etc. By practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one engages in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. The first and foremost of such devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. This is a very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. The more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind, remaining alone, etc. Hold on 1 second, I got something wrong here. Sorry. The more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from activities not devoted to the Lord, one can very easily learn vairagya. Vairagya means detachment from matter and engagement of the mind in spirit. Impersonal spiritual detachment is more difficult than attaching the mind to the activities of Krishna. This is practical because by hearing about Krishna, one becomes automatically attached to the Supreme Spirit. The attachment is called Pareshanubhava. Pareshanubhava. Spiritual satisfaction. It is just like the feeling of satisfaction of a hungry man has for every morsel of food he eats. The more one eats while hungry, the more one feels satisfaction and strength. Similarly, by the discharge of devotional service, one feels transcendental satisfaction as the mind becomes detached from material objectives. It is something like curing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. Hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Krishna is therefore expert treatment that the mad mind and eating for the mad mind and eating the foodstuff offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This is the treatment. This treatment is a process of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So that's the process that Prabhupada gave us that is practical and suitable for the Kali Yuga people, Kali Yuga man. And the practice is the practice of devotional service, the practice of sadhana bhakti. And vairagya is a natural result of the practices of devotional service. Vasudeva Bhagavati, that the verse in the second chapter of text number 1, that by devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically vairagya and vidya, both renunciation and transcendental knowledge, becomes manifested. So, is dealing with the mind from the perspective of is very wonderful and very clever. It's like, remember that we were talking before about where is lost the greatest enemy of the living entity, what strategic places have taken into control. So the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. The mind is a central focal point. And so, like a warfare, then to come to control that central point, then the attack goes from two places. But first, the immediate one. You control the soldiers, you control the army, the immediate, which is the senses. So the senses are attacked or counteract by the practices of Krishna consciousness, the engagement in devotional service. The senses are engaged in devotional service because the senses have to be engaged. So by the engagements of the senses, then the mind, you started to send messages to the mind. The mind started to feel, think, and will according to the engagements that we give to the senses. So, and the process of devotional service, what it does is not just a regular activity, but because it's a transcendental activity, then it purifies both the senses and the mind. And the purifications of the senses and the mind then allows one to then hear very carefully the messages And then with that, also the intelligence becomes purified. The intelligence is higher than the mind, but the intelligence is very easily bewildered by the powerful mind. So although the intelligence have the capacity to control the mind, it's a subtle element, but this mind is such a, central, pivotal point that the intelligence can become bewildered. So when the intelligence becomes purified, how the intelligence becomes purified? By understanding and by studying, by carefully going through the scriptures. By transcendental knowledge, the intelligence becomes purified. Transcendental knowledge gives us the capacity to discriminate properly, to understand what is right and what is wrong. That's what transcendental knowledge does. And so, with the intelligence becoming purified, the senses becoming purified by the process of hearing and chanting, by the process of devotional service, by engaging our senses in the process of devotional service, then the mind becomes controlled. The mind becomes satisfied. So the analogy is that the mind wants satisfaction. So if you give the mind something in which it becomes satisfied, then it will be very happy. It will be pacified. So you give engagements to the mind by engaging the senses in Krishna consciousness. So the famous verse that Srila Narada Muni gave in the Narada in the Bhakti Shastri, in the what is it, the Bhakti Shastri, Narada Bhakti Shastri, how's it called? The Bhakti Sutras, the Bhakti Sutras. In the Bhakti Sutras, Srila Narada Muni gives this famous verse that Srila Rupa Goswami quotes in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Sarva upadi vinimurtam tat pare twana nirmalam hrishikena hishikesha shevanam bhaktir uchate. That the translation is that bhakti or devotional service means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is free from all material designations, and one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. So that's how the principle applies, and how this is the very suitable process for us at the present time to achieve, self-realization, and specifically to control and purify our mind. And then when the mind is purified, then what happens? And I finish with this. The process that Lord Chaitanya gave us is break down what happens first, and then what, and then what, and then what, like that. So with the chanting of the holy name, which is a process of self-realization that Lord Chaitanya gave us, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanan, Krishna Sankirtanan. So the first thing, the cleansing of the mind, the controlling of the mind, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. And then after that, Baba Maha Davarni Nirvapanam, which is material life ceases. The fire of material existence gets extinguished. And then what? So that position is explained, that is the position of Brahma Bhuta. That one now is able to understand, the mirror is clean, material life is finished. I'm seeing clearly in the mirror now who I am. I'm a spirit soul. And then it opens the natural condition of the spirit soul, which is Sreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam, that the lotus of devotion opens in the living entity. So now devotional service fully, this devotional service that is not affected by material desires or by material designations, but is the devotional service of the spirit soul opens. And then that condition of the spirit soul, Satchit Ananda, of full of eternity, knowledge, full of knowledge, if that knowledge that is intrinsic in the living entity also fully manifests. So, Sreya Chairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidya Vadhu Jivanam Vidya, that the natural understanding, the natural knowledge, spiritual knowledge of the living entity is fully manifest. And then Anandan Buddhi Vardhanam, now Ananda, the spiritual happiness of the living entity that is like an ocean becomes available. Anandan Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipadam Purnam Brita Swananam. And then that is the nectar, that is the nectar that the living entity is looking for, is fully in that place, that the nectar of the relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's what the process of self-realization that we've been given. The practices of devotional service, of them, which is the chief one, is the hearing and chanting of the holy names. So, to control the mind. I stop here. Any comments or questions? Yes, back to Mitch, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I'm wondering, when, in the context of your class, when someone says, "Oh, I'm getting mental," or living in the mental space, what does it mean that when someone says, "Oh, Prabhu, you're getting mental"?
Yeah. Well, I think we get so caught in the world that the mind creates for us. The whole reality that is created, that that it's almost like the mind controls the whole thing. In the in the in the ideal situation, or in the situation, the healthy situation, the intelligence is able to control the mind. It's like, the picture of the chariot of the mind, and the reins are the means to control the senses. The senses are like the horses. So the mind is able to control the senses, but the driver is the intelligence. So the driver holds the reins, and with the reins, you control the senses. So if we have a strong Krishna conscious intelligence, then you're very safe. So, the chariot takes us very nicely to our destination when, the strong driver is controlling with the reins the horses. So if the driver is bewildered and have no control, is either not holding the reins or don't know what to do with the reins, so now the controlling matter, the mind, is on its own. It's just basically doing what the mind does, which is flickering. This, that, or maybe this, or I like that, maybe I want this, or but if I want that, I don't know if this is going to, you go into this whole thing. It's like this. It's chanchala, it's unstable. That's just the mind by itself. That's the description, what it is, Chanchala, unstable, very obstinate. No, it has to be like this, like that when you get something, very strong, and disturbed. So it's plain that it's like a flame that is hit by wind. It's like this. You see it. So, and we experience that with the mind. So, being in when the devotees say, you're mental, Prabhu, means that you're not using your intelligence. You're allowing the mind to control the whole thing. And the mind, because of its uncontrolled nature, is just here and there, here and there. Maybe this, no, maybe not that. Oh, okay, we do this. Next day, no, that doesn't work. And like that. So it's tiring, and just experience of trying to focus on devotional service. Sometimes, the mind is just becomes such an obstacle. So it's pivotal. It's so pivotal for us. So the whole thing that we're doing at this moment, most of us sadhakas, is to try to clean that mind, purify it by devotional service. So the more attempt we are in our practices, the more successful we are in controlling the mind. And then we see the results of controlling the mind, then you can go to the next levels of devotional service. So the unwanted things in the mind, that's where the attachments, that's where they are. All these things that we say, the attachments, that's where they are. They're in the mind. So all these conceptions, they're in the mind. Everything is there. So we have that's painstakingly, we're taking all those things out. Does that answer? Jitendra Prabhuji.
As contrary to the situations that's so prevailing now, I've often heard that the material atmosphere is just to agitate the mind to no limit, just, buy this, buy that, and then there's a verse in the Bhagavatam that says, whatever you wish to describe which is separate in vision from the Lord simply reacts with different names and forms to agitate the mind as a boat on the water has no resting place.
Yeah, wonderful. Yes.
You know that verse?
Yes, yeah. I heard it. Where is that verse again?
I thought it was 11th canto, but I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember, yeah.
Just came to mind. And then to find Krishna consciousness in the Kali Yuga is like a turtle underwater surfacing through a knothole in a board. It's so rare, that we've come across this because it's so pervasive, Kali Yuga, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
But that's another verse too. I believe that's in the 11th canto. Thanks.
Yeah, it's that's why the process that we're giving is by Lord Chaitanya is extra powerful and extra merciful, because it's just so difficult. Everything is true. It's just meant to this. The whole atmosphere is just to agitate the mind.
Another verse, what is night for the conditioned soul is a time of awakening for the introspective sage.
Yeah, second chapter.
Yeah, it's a nice verse to complement that.
Shihab Jitendra giving class here. You're like a source of quotes that when I prepare here, I look for these things that is called the Vani quotes. It's a website that, you put something and then it comes. Yeah, you're like the Vani quotes of the Kishore Kishori. Microphone?
Malati was here and she says, don't expect me to be POD. And we're saying, what's she talking about? And then she said, Prabhupada on demand. I can't remember everything all at once. It just doesn't, it just comes at different times. It just doesn't, don't expect me to answer all your questions. And, it just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then Prabhupada, and he said, when he was writing the literature, translating, he said, I didn't write these books, Krishna wrote these books. And that the inspiration wasn't always there because, he was disturbed with management, So that's why he wanted sannyasis strictly to preach, stay focused, But management is very difficult too, So anyways, that came to mind also.
Yeah. All right. Anything else?
Murari to the bank,
All right.
waiting for me. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.